Welcome to the Call to Flourish podcast. My name is Thomas Cronquist, and I'm your guest host with Father Charles Sikorski, the president of Divine Mercy University. Father, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine, Tom.
Well, we have another very interesting interview with Dr. Harvey Payne, who, as you know, is the dean of the School of Counseling here at Divine Mercy University. He's worked in the mental health field for many years, 35 years, primarily serving children and adolescents. And he's going to speak to us today about rebuilding your relationship with your child in the midst of Covid-19. Welcome, Dr. Payne. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Glad to be with you all.
It seems, though, this is a very important topic. The COVID pandemic seems to be kind of hanging on. It doesn't completely go away. And I've heard the term COVID fatigue, and I've seen how it's affected my family. With the events and different things being canceled and my children not being able to do all the normal things that they had done pre-COVID. So why do we have to rebuild our relationships with our children in the midst of this pandemic?
Great question. And the thing that comes to my mind is many parents had to shift roles and go into roles that they weren't used to, such as all of a sudden now I'm teaching, I'm monitoring my child's every moment throughout the day, schoolwork. The difficulty that many children had with online learning, especially when schools are just under such pressure to get that online up and running so quickly. And the advice out there was, everything from, make sure you're monitoring your child so that they get everything done so they don't fall behind, to just let it go because the relationship is the most important thing. And that all those different competing opinions and just the struggle for homeschoolers, the fact that many of the normal, typical outside type of activities and relationships could not be maintained, gave a whole different feel for many homeschool families. And so again, parents being put in a different kind of role that really strained the relationship. And as you wisely said, COVID fatigue is a real thing and it's going on. And so how in the midst of all of this, in the midst of the ever-changing landscape and in midst of the fatigue that happens, how do I help my child? What's the best thing that I can do to really help them be resilient during this difficult time?
I guess the question I would have, Dr. Payne, and what advice would you give parents to help them do that, and toward the child, but also toward the parent, because I think the fatigue goes all the way around, but to everyone.
Definitely goes all the way around, and on some level, it's nice to be able to give specific advice and to say, hey, this will help, that will help. And one of the things that I firmly believe is that in this type of situation, one of the best things is to rebuild the relationship. And rebuilding the relationship not only is a positive for the child, but because the calling that every parent has in wanting the best for their child and to really love their child, it actually also definitely helps the parent, and it helps both the parent and the child to develop resiliency. And one of the things that I'd like to talk about, because I think it's one of the most powerful ways to help, is a technique called special time.
Special time. Okay. What is special time?
Well, typically, when we think about special time, it means let's take the kids out for ice cream. Let's take the kids to Walmart to buy a new toy. But in the mental health world of helping children, special time is really having a specific time where you interact with your child in a way where they become the focus of your attention, and you actually allow the child to lead you in his or her play. And it's this experience of the child having this deep encouragement that builds in the child's heart and has many positive outcomes for both the child and the parent.
Seems to me it's very important for the parents to have or develop stronger relationships with their children during this period, because other relationships outside of the house have been reduced, and they need that interaction. I see that with my children. We're concentrated, or during the pandemic, we were concentrated in the home oftentimes. Sometimes I liken it to the fuel rods in a nuclear reactor just being brought together and generated. But they need those relationships, and when they can't have them outside the home, it's the parental relationships are much more important. Do you think that's true?
I think that's a very insightful comment, Tom. We all hunger for meaningful relationships, and when we can't get it from a broader community, it actually puts more weight, if you will, on the key relationships that we can have. And so especially for the parents.
I notice also my children develop, depending more on virtual relationships. We've talked about this in the past. I talk to them about screen jumping from screen to screen. Their classes are online, and then they're playing video games with their friends online. And then when they're not doing that, they're, what's on TV, and it jumping from screen to screen. Hopefully that will reduce itself in the future. But what kind of problems does that cause?
The first thing I think about is the difficulty of multitasking. And for most of us as humans, it's nice to talk about multitasking, but the reality is that most of us can't do multitasking. And when you're rapidly switching from one task to another task, there's a cost. And so enduring all your focus on one task until it's completed actually ends up saving you time to then complete another task, as opposed to the multitasking. It's hard not to be distracted, and it's hard to shift your cognitive gears, if you will, with the multitasking. The one thing I will say, though, for individuals who struggle with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, for many of them, having background music or something else going on actually helps them to focus more on the task. And that's definitely something for parents with children who struggle, with ADHD, just to understand that sometimes that actually can be helpful, but that's not the norm.
Question, Dr. Payne, with the, you mentioned special time is one of the things parents should try to do, and to spend time, kind of allow the child to sort of direct that particular time. What are things that parents can't do? I know in the pandemic, maybe the shutdown and the kids being at home so much, what are signs that a parent might see in a child where they may need to get professional help? And how would they go through that process if they've never had to do that before?
I think it's very important to be aware of what has been your child's baseline, if you will, and to look at a couple key areas. So looking at, they have typically been It's been easy for them to fall asleep. They usually wake up refreshed. All of a sudden, my child is having difficulty falling asleep. They're very groggy in the morning. Looking at levels of activity, my child, who is very engaged and doing many things, is just sort of sitting on the couch watching TV all the time. Looking at mood, and we know from temperament studies that, about 70% of children, have the normal ups and downs that we all have. About 15% are like, doesn't matter what happens, I'm just happy to be here. And they're sort of blessed with that kind of temperament. And then you have the 15% that life just always seems heavy. It always seems irritable. It always seems more than what they can handle. And definitely for that grouping, professional counseling can be quite helpful in learning how to handle that and how to respond in more positive ways. The key for me, though, really is that baseline concept of this is how my child normally responds. And, ooh, man, they're much quicker to anger. They're not eating as much. And that's where it's not one symptom, but it's looking at the baseline and the difference that you're seeing in your child. And for younger children, often the stress sign that we see is they're regressing. Didn't need a parent to help be with them to go sleep at night. And now all of a sudden they're back to needing that. And so can be different signs, but all based on your knowledge as a parent of your child.
In my experience, I've also seen that there's a competition for parental time, daddy time. When I get home from work, there's I have to prioritize and budget my time because there's only so much time in the day and after work. So, I see also maybe some jealousy and some emotions, negative emotions developing at times. What's the best way to deal with those things on the parental side and the side of the children?
Great question. And actually, I think maybe fleshing out a little bit more about what special time is could be helpful. And special time is for children from toddlers all the way up to about age 10. Although I've definitely had children 11 and older who also enjoy and benefit from special time. And it's setting up for that one particular child that right now, this is our special time. And it really starts off with as little as 5 minutes. I mean, we're not talking about this is a 90-minute thing that I've got to block off. No, setting up about 5 minutes, being with the child in an area where the two of you can just play together without being disturbed, and having toys that you can engage with, construction toys, puppets, creative toys, no screen time, video computer games, and no games with rules, no board games. I mean, if you've ever played with kids with board games, there's often the whole issue of rules and who did what. So it's just the fun, hands-on, engaging kinds of toys. And then really following the child's lead. So no comments, no rules, no questions, no criticism. In some way, stop being a parent, sort of our typical parental style, and just be with the child and enjoy them. And describe what you see. Oh, wow, boy, that dinosaur jumped really high. Paraphrase what you hear. He was really upset when he said that, wasn't he? And play along, imitate, do sort of parallel play even. But again, most of all, enjoy delight in your child. And so will focusing like that on your child bring about some jealousy in some other kids? It's very possible. And so finding ways to set up different special times on different days for different kids, having parents switch off. I've even had older kids do special time with younger kids. And again, they're not being a parent. It's not a parental role. It's just enhancing that sibling relationship, which can be very important and positive in large families or when there's a large gap, of age in between.
Great suggestions. Very, 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 very helpful.
And I just like to play. So for me, it's just sort of a natural,
Bring out the child within you.
Yes.
Meet them on their level.
Oh, I love how you said that. Yeah. Meet them on their level, meet them where they're at, which is not to over spiritualize, but isn't that what God did for us? And sending us Jesus.
He meets us at our level and he delights in us, right? In a certain way, imitating Christ, imitating God the Father in these relationships.
Yes.
How important doing things as a family, or if they're siblings, getting them to play together or to do things together, what approach might a parent take with that? Because maybe they're just tired of being around their brother or sister all the time,
Yes. I do want to make it clear that special time doesn't take the place of family time. And, and one of the trends in America has been for quite a while now, the loss of eating together. Used to be that a table that y'all sat at and ate was one of the first things you would buy when you moved into your first house. It might never be bought today. It might be one of the last things that gets bought because feeding has become a grazing almost situation where I run in from school, I do some grazing, and I go off to soccer practice. It's not the family time. And so I do think actually eating together, and for all cultures, eating together has always had a very powerful impact on societies, and making that time even a fun time. I can remember my wife, who is also an educator and also likes to have fun, putting underneath each child's plate a particular way that they needed to behave at the dinner table. And so they would have to peek and look at that. And then other people would have to guess what they were supposed to be doing. And so the child that was constantly, can you please give me, got reinforced and had fun in learning just common courtesies, common etiquette, at the table. So I think having those kinds of experiences, watching a movie together and then discussing it. What were the values? What were the artistic, creative components that were really compelling? What were the truths that got expressed in that movie? Actually, Tom and I the other day in the hallway were discussing how people just need these relationships, and platforms like Hulu are starting to cast parties where you and your extended family that aren't with you or friends can pick the movie and when to start it. And you can all be watching it at the same time, commenting to each other, pausing it, talking, and finding those activities that pull us together, even when everybody can't be together, even in one space.
You mentioned play and how important play is. Um, Talk about play therapy. Is that just, I guess, children express themselves in ways that reveals a lot about their psyche, their emotions, what they're going through how they play. But most parents wouldn't pick up on the subtle cues, I don't think. What kind of talk a little bit about play therapy and how that can be in how that might work with in the parental children relationship.
Special time actually comes out of play therapy, meaning that the context and the setup and what we're asking the parent to do is in fact what professionals do in play therapy. And there's a number of therapy models where therapists actually train parents to do that with their child. And on some level, although historically we've always believed that it was the brilliant insight of the therapist that made the difference for the child, in reality, it was always the attachment and relationship that made the change. And so what you're actually creating in play therapy is this environment where the child can begin to feel at home and comfortable. They can begin to know the limits, because there are definitely certain limits in play therapy. You can't harm yourself. You can't harm the therapist. You can't destroy things. But learning how to be more expressive, both in their play and in their talk. They're feeling deeply heard and deeply accepted. And one of my favorite biblical stories that always comes to my mind, which I know might sound odd, the Old Testament and play therapy. But if you remember the story of Hagar, who was the slave of, at that time, Abram and Sarai, and she is forced to become the surrogate mother for the child, and the child is Ishmael, and they get rid of her and put her out in the desert. And the angel of the Lord comes to visit and begins to speak truth to her and how he is going to take care of her. She calls him a particular name for God. And it's not the God who heard me, it's the God who sees me. And in play therapy, children feel seen in a way that's transformative, that helps them to be more resilient, that helps them to understand their limits, helps them to understand how to discover and know themselves. And it's really this transformative environment, if you will, that's the most important, as opposed to historically with Anna Freud and others, Melanie Klein, that somehow our interpretation of what the child was doing was the most important.
We have this, I think we all experienced that, right? The need to be heard and understood and accepted and so forth. You ever give thought where that comes from? I mean, we know, okay, it's an effective therapy and it's effective in a lot of in developing strong relationships with others. But what is it about us that we have that need and that desire?
I mean, my only answer is we were created that way. And if you look at especially the literature on attachment, actually, if we, and maybe we can do this, I'm off script here, maybe we can do it, but maybe we could show the still face experiment, which only takes a couple minutes. And it's the research and attachment where you have this young child and the mother is engaging with the child back and forth, and the child is happy and everything. And then the mother just stops, turns around, gets a flat face, turns back to the child, and the child just starts trying to reach for her, begins to whimper, literally gets physically distressed. And the child is just like, I can't bear this. And then the mother turns around and comes back with the engaging face. And all of those signs and symptoms of this is a very distressed infant disappear, go away. And it is that just not emotional, but neurophysiological need that we have to be seen and heard and understand by others. That's part of our flourishing that also builds resiliency, including the ability to tolerate pain. And I know I'm talking about different research, but one of the other research projects that I'm very fascinated with is Sue Johnson, who's the founder of emotionally focused therapy for couples, does a study where she puts one of the partners who's in a distressed relationship in a functional MRI and studies the brain and occasionally gives shocks to the bottom of the feet. And not, horribly painful, but distressing. And when the partner in the distressed relationship holds the hand, it doesn't do anything, and sometimes it even makes the pain worse. When a stranger holds the hand of the person going through the functional MRI, again, doesn't make much difference at all. At the end of therapy, they do it again. And at the end of therapy, where there's a successful re-engagement of the couple, they do it. And the two things that are noticed is, one is the brain is actually even more aware of what's going on, but actually the person feels the pain as only a mild annoyance and not pain, even though it's at the same level. And when his or her partner holds their hand, it significantly reduces the pain even more. And so there is this deep neurophysiological need that we have to be connected, even just for our physical life. And so it's sort of like sunflowers who, will move based on the sun because they realize they don't realize, but because of how they've developed, that I need the sun to be alive.
Yeah. Thinking maybe ultimately, we're made in God's image and likeness, which is the Holy Trinity,
Mm-hmm.
which is this, it's perfect harmonious relationship where everything is intertwined, and maybe there's a connection there, ultimately, because sometimes, you experience something, it's like, well, I just need to tell somebody about this. You feel much better. Doesn't change what happened. Doesn't solve a problem many times, but just being able to tell someone about it seems to just have a tremendous, a tremendous impact.
Definitely. And I think, grounding that concept in philosophical and theological understandings for many of us is very important and definitely a part of why we're here at Divine Mercy University, because we have the freedom to think about that and to do that. The capacity for resiliency isn't changing the adversity, is being able to endure the adversity. And so talking about a horrible, stressful situation that can't be changed and being really heard and seen gives you more resiliency to keep going, even though it hasn't really changed that difficult situation.
That makes me think about the children today, many children today who are members of broken families, or maybe both parents are working, or other situations where they don't have that interaction with their parents, loved ones, and how they might suffer in their emotional development. And I've seen in my family, it's so easy for me to get involved with this on a smaller scale projects, trying to get different things done, checking off boxes, in the evenings and the weekends. And my wife has reminded me, she says, "Dear, your children are the project." And so maybe you could speak to, as we finish up here, how the negative effects of not having those healthy relationships in a family. What are those?
The things that we know is that every area of your life gets impacted. Everything from how your immune system works, that then puts you more at risk for certain diseases, enhances risk taking as individuals grow up, makes the resiliency against addictions lower. Just a multitude of outcomes. The thing that is very clear, though, and this is something I think is very important for an audience, is when you look at the research and what helps kids who are born with some type of difficulty, let's say a difficult birth or some type of minor disability or something, and have situations in their family that we would call adverse childhood events, a parent who's an alcoholic or something like that, struggles with alcoholism, having a person even outside, and often it is a person outside of the family. It could be a teacher from third grade. It could be a coach. It could be somebody in the congregation who really does what we're talking about, really sees that child. Definitely, if they can help them develop some mastery in some hobby or some area, to create what's been called sort of an island of competency in the midst of the storm of their life. Those, what we might see as pretty small incidents, we actually know produce resiliency that makes significant difference down the road for these individuals. And it doesn't mean that for all of us that adverse events in our life don't have an impact on us, but resiliency can definitely help you rise above those incidents. And that's where I think for all of us to realize the influence that we have with children and adolescents around us in very often simple ways that can be powerful.
Very, very helpful. Dr. Payne, I want to thank you very much for being with us again today and talking about this very important, very interesting topic. Where can people go to find resources, more information about the things we've discussed today?
There's a number of parent books that are out on developing relationships, both with children and adolescents. Actually, for those who are interested in mental health training, one of the unique parts of our curriculum at DMU that comes out of our Catholic Christian understanding of families is a focus on how to help children and adolescents, both in the PsyD program and in the clinical mental health counseling program. Students learn about play therapy, how to do play therapy. We both have courses in marriage and family therapy. And many programs in the United States in PsyD or in clinical mental health counseling, you can actually go all the way through without having a course on child or adolescent therapy or marriage and family. And I think that's a really important aspect of a professional mental health competency, is to be able to address the whole family and not just the individual person.
Well, again, Dr. Payne, thank you very much for being with us today, and we look forward to having you on again very, very soon.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.